We begin the current Daf Mesechta Yevamot of Tzadik Beis. We begin 3 lines up at the top of the Yamad, where the Gemara continues to explain the halacha of our opening Mishnah of this parak, discussing this concept of when a woman gets remarried erroneously, thinking her husband died. Turns out that it was really alive, which we had ramifications regarding if it was through Eid Echad or with 2 witnesses. And now that our Gemara begins from the quote of the Mishnah. If Nisas Hapi Bezdin, there's a difference regarding if she gets married based on the permission of the courts, which is with 1 witness. With this halach is Teitzei, she has to leave from both husbands, etc. However, but she's going to be pater from a chatas. In contrast, where if it was with 2 witnesses, so then she actually is permitted to go back to her first husband. However, she's going to be chayim chatas because it was her own mistake. Now, on this halacha of that when it was a pi bezdin, she's pater from a chatas. Amaziri, Ziri says, however, less lemaslitin. We don't hold the halacha of the Mishnah, but the Tana Beit Midrash from what we learned in the Beis Medrash. The Tana Beit Midrash we learned in the Brisa in the Beis Medrash that says as follows: Haydu bezdin, if the court ruled shashaka chama that the sun set on Shabbos evening, which means already Matzah Shabbos and you're permitted to do work, well, b'seif at the end the sun is shining, but the court had said that it's already shkia, that the sun already set. Says the Brisa, Einzu Hayra. This is not a ruling that we're relying on to exempt an individual who followed the ruling of the court, or if let's say the tzibur, the whole Jewish people, followed the ruling of the court. They don't bring a par helam davar like when the tzibur follows the erroneous ruling of the courts. Rather, every single individual has to bring his own she-goat or his own she-lamb, because that's not considered helam davar. It's not even a ruling of a lapse of awareness, meaning of an erroneous ruling. El ta'os. It's just a mistake. It's an error. That is, they thought that something happened which didn't happen, which according to everyone we revealed right now that was a mistake. So therefore, the halach is going to be that everyone's going to have their own individual liability. So therefore, says the Iri, same thing over here in the halach of a Mishnah. It was a ta'os. They thought that the person died, and here the husband's coming, everyone sees him alive. Rather, obviously, it wasn't a hayra of the bezin, it was a ta'os that was done, and therefore it's an individual liability that you relied on the witness, and therefore the woman actually would be chayv chatas, not like the way it said in the halacha of Mishnah. However, Rav Nachman Nami says no, the halacha of the Mishnah is correct. Hayrahi, it is a ruling, it's not just a ta'os. As Rav Nachman says, Tedi Shino Dayrahi, that's a ruling, meaning she's getting married. Why? Not error that she made because she made a mistake of the Eid Echad. No, she's relying on the ruling of the courts, and she's relying on them, and they're not on the Eid, which exempts her, because the B'chal Torah Kula in the entire Torah. We don't believe biblically 1 witness. And here we do. So the Torah doesn't believe the Eid Echad. The rabbis, the court, they're trusting him, and she's doing based on what they're saying. My time, what's the reason? Isn't it because it's a ruling? Meaning, when the courts rule that the chaylev of the keva, the fats of the stomach of an animal is permitted, which they had this lapse of a mistake in halacha, an inappropriate psak, and people rely on them. Here also, that we're relying on the courts that they say every woman is particular to check and to get married. It comes out it's a mistake in their ruling, because she ended up not checking well and she got married. But it was based on their ruling that she was relying on, not that she just made an error, like, it wasn't sunset, and so that's not a ruling, that's like the mistake that was done. Here it's different, here it's considered hira. However, Amar Rabbi says, like Ziri says, no, Teda the tois. So you should know that, no, it is a ta'os, it's an error, and it's not it's error that's individual. It's a mitzias. It's nothing to do with the court's ruling. It's something in the circumstances, in the environment, and therefore she's going to be liable. Not like our Mishnah says, because he says as follows. He says the following svara. So the ilohar bezdin b'chaylev u'b'dam leter. Let's say the court will come along and they would rule regarding forbidden fats or blood. For some reason, they came through a whole calculation. They say that's permitted. And then they see a bona fide, clear-cut reasoning that says, no, l'isura, obviously chaylev and dam is forbidden. Ki hadri v'amr le'ter, if they would subsequently come back again and say, with not a clear-cut, definitive permissibility, we wouldn't pay attention to them, because we obviously know that there's a mistake over here. So, now in contrast, so let's say when there's 1 witness comes along and says her husband died, and they permit her to go get married. And then also 2 people come along and asarna, and they make it forbidden for her because they say, no, your husband is alive. So that's a definitive clear because you have 2 witnesses. When subsequently another witness comes along and says, no, but now he died, The halacha would be shari-in-law. We would permit her. Okay, now one witness comes along and says, now he died. They're permitted to get married. My time, what's the reason? La misham de tozu isn't because the halacha is that we had said that the first witness had misled us. It was a to'os. Now, the second one witness, we believe, as Rashi explains. If you think the first witness, that first single witness that came along, it was a hirah, a ruling, and that is we're relying on the logic of the courts. But then if that's the case, when you see definitively through two witnesses that you obviously didn't rule correctly, in other words, you see that the hirah is incorrect because women are not medayik mitzvah because they made a mistake by the first one witness. So how could you go back now again to the first rationale and allow with one witness? Obviously we can't rely on that. No, obviously it's not hirah. Because if it was hirah, then you would never come back to that because it's obviously mistaken the hirah. No, it's nothing to do with the hirah. It's a to'us in that eid echad. So if it's in the eid echad, you're not really relying on the courts. So then you're going to be chayav achatas again, not like the halacha of the Mishnah. And Rabbi Eliezer also, Rabbi Eliezer held the to'us that the halacha over here by the eid echad is a to'us, not a hirah. It's not relying on the court. It's a mistake that misled from the eid echad, and they were not like the Mishnah. She would be chayav achatas. It's not like Linda Brisa. Where do we find Rabbi Eliezer saying this? Rabbi Eliezer the Tanner, Rabbi Eliezer, he says when the woman gets married based on the courts with eid echad, he says yikuif hadin esahar. The ruling is going to bore a hole through the mountain. In other words, we don't say that she got married based on the ruling of the courts. Should be exempt like anytime you rely on the courts. No, we go after the depth of the idea over here, and we say no, it really was an error. Because you are relying on the eid echad, and b'tabi chadash minish has to bring a fatty carbon chatas for her liability. Now, because she get married when really her husband was still alive. Says the Gemara as follows: if you say Rabbi Eliezer holds like all those different opinions that hold that it's a to'us, not like the halacha of the Mishnah, and that's why she has to bring a carbon. But if you say that it was a ruling, so Amay Masir carbon, she's relying on the courts. Why would she have to bring a carbon? Says no, it's not a raya. But then look at Rabbi Eliezer holds. Even if it is a ruling, but there is an opinion that holds yachid she'asa b'ras bezin. This whole exemption when you're relying on the ruling of the court that you're exempt from liability is only by a tzibur. But a yachid that does like the ruling of the bezin actually is michayev. So that's why chayev. Nothing to do because it's to us. But then the Gemara says no, that's not true. If that would be the case, so ma'ikev hadin as a heart. Then what's he saying? That let's get to the depth of the let the ruling bore a hole through the mountain. That wording sounds like that if we wouldn't have analyzed this ruling very well, we would have thought to say that it should be pater. Why would you think to be pater? Even if whatever it is, even if it's a ruling, yachad shasal piaros bezin, you're saying michayev. Obviously, no. You would have thought to say that it's a ra, and that's what we're saying that no, actually it's a tos. And you see, Rabbi Eliezer holds a tos, not like the halacha of the Mishnah, and therefore these amiram would stand correct that like Ziri said, lesl masnitin mitamei midrasha, that's not a hira, it's actually considered as a tos. The Mishnah said, if the courts ruled that she can get married, etc., and then instead of getting married, which she had permission for, she actually was makalkal herself, she actually ruined herself, so then she's michai carbon, because that you cannot blame it on the courts, because you didn't do what they allowed you to do. Even though if you did what the courts did, you wouldn't be chai carbon. So Michael Kala, what does it mean that she ruined herself? The Gemara says Rabbi Lazar Omer. He says zinsa, meaning she was mezana instead of getting married to someone else. But he says almon l'kohen gadol means she was a widow getting married to a kohen gadol, or krusha v'chutz a kohen hedged, which that's forbidden. That we never let you do. That's a forbidden relationship. Then you would be liable because you obviously were not relying on the courts. So the Gemara explains. Mandam is zinsa according to one that says that she had an out of wedlock relationship. Well, Koshkin Amon Kohen Gadol, but sure that for that they didn't permit you to go ahead and be a widow getting married to Kohen Gadol because that's a negative prohibition of the Torah. That's a forbidden union. That for sure will not be. That will also be considered kilkula. But all the way around, Mandam Amon Kohen Gadol, according to one that says that a widow Kohen Gadol is where she will be liable for carbon when the husband's really alive. But not when she was mazana. Then she won't be liable. My time was the reason, because the Amish could say, you made me into a single girl. That you did do. No, you never said I can get married to a Kohen Gadol if I'm a mono. You never said that I can get married to a Kohen Hedge, but you did make me single. If I'm a single girl, then I'm not going to be chayiv if I'm a zana, meaning you let me. Not that a person's supposed to do those type of relations, but it's not a negative prohibition in the Torah, and therefore she's not going to be liable if it turns out that her husband is still alive. Because she did follow ultimately the ruling as being a single girl. Now, Tani Kabbalah said, Rabbi Yechanan, we have a brayso that says, like Rabbi Yechanan's interpretation, that it was only for Malka and Gadol, not for that of being Mezana. For Mezana, she would not be Chayiv. As the Brisa says, if the courts rule that she can get married, meaning with one aid, she goes and rules herself. For example, says the Brisa, a widow to a high priest, a divorcee or one had chalitza to a kohen hedged. Now we just add on, once we're bringing this in, which supports him, the whole Brisa says, which is a machlekes, the first opinion, which is this Rabbi Eliezer, this is Rabbi Eliezer, so he says, chayiv b'karban, which I somehow have the gears to Rabbi Eliezer. So chayev b'karban, shechayev b'karban al kol bia div Rabbi Eliezer. So Rabbi Eliezer or Rabbi Eliezer holds that what's called bias machalkes, as the Gemara explains the Kriz of Tesvav Med Aleph, that although generally in one lapse of awareness you only chayev one, even if you do many averos, but here every single act of bia is considered an individual aver, so it's an independent aver that you chayev for each one independently. But when they say no carbon nechal al kol, you only liable for one carbon for them all, because since she didn't know in between that she was doing something wrong, so it's like eating two olive-sized pieces of fats in one lapse of awareness, you only chayev as one. But the Chacham do agree to Belazar in the case of Shem Nisas L'Chamishim the Adam. She got married to 5 different people. Again, old mistaken thinking that her husband was dead, and meaning in this prohibition of kilkala, which to someone that's forbidden to her, and then it turns out that he actually is alive, which again, although generally she's exempt because she's relying on the courts, but here she'd be chayv because she didn't do what they ruled, because it was one was a malakan gadol, whichever it is, to 5 different people that she's forbidden to. Let's say grusha to 5 different kain hedges. Here the Chacham would agree that shechayv carbon on each individual one, even though it's one lapse of awareness. Because ultimately each body is considered independent of a liability, and there they would agree, unlike bias machalakin, they would agree by guf and mechalakin. So now look at the next Mishnah, continuing with the theme of the opening Mishnah regarding when she hears that her husband died, here in a different ramification regarding as it applies to the laws of Yibum, which is not just relative to the husband dying, but also to when her son died. So the opening case spoke about when just her husband goes overseas. Here her husband and her son went overseas. They come, they tell her, look, your husband died, and then only subsequently did your son die, which means she would never had a zika for Yibum, because at the time of death, that's what establishes the criterion, and at that point there was a son. So even if he ends up dying, Mesim is Kechai. So Vanessa, so he gets married to some other person. Then they subsequently tell him, no, sorry, it was a mistake. It was the other way around. Your son died first, then your husband, which actually means that she was chayv in Yibum. So Teisha, she has to leave her second husband. Vavla, then the children she has from him, Rishoin va'achroin, the earlier and the later ones, which I'm going to explain what exactly does that mean, are mamzer. Why mamzer? So the Gemara tells us that this is like Rabbi Kiva, who in the Mem Testament Alf tells us that this is mamzer from Chiv Alavim. And this is Chiv Alav because the Yevamah is not like getting married L'Shuk, and she is a Yevamah. She didn't think so, but it turns out that she was Chayv in Yibum. So therefore, from that Chiv Alav of marrying that other person, those children are mamzer. Now let's say they tell her the other way around. Your son died first, and then your husband died. So when the Shabbos she did Yibum, because it turns out there was no children at the time of the death. Then they tell her, oh, it's exactly the opposite. No, I'm sorry. Your husband died first, then your son, which means to say that she was actually forbidden in her brother-in-law as a Eishasach. So Teisha said, leave the Yavam, and Vavlad Risham Achar Mamzer, and her earlier and later children are all Mamzerim because it's from a Chiv Karis of Eishasach. Now let's say they tell her, Mesbalacha, your husband died. Then she gets married, and then they tell her, Kayim Haya. You know, when you got married, he actually was still alive at that point. But amazing, he ended up dying. So then Teitzesh has to leave from her husband, even though from her second husband, even though her first husband is already dead, because when she did get married, he was a boil. And when you have his nus as a Esha says, which she did at that moment, you're also labal on labal. So she's forbidden to him, she has to leave from him. V'havlad Rishon, and the first children, meaning that she had when her husband was still alive, because it turned out that for the first year or whatever, he was still alive at that point. So the first child is a mamzer. V'achan and mamzer, the children after the husband had already died. So now actually those are not mamzerim because she's not an Eish at that point. Now let's say they tell her, going back really to the opening halacha of our first Mishnah, let's say they tell her, Meis Balach, your husband died. So we were always speaking about when she gets married to someone else. But let's only be niskatcha, she only gets engaged to someone else. When her husband comes, so then says the Mishnah Materes Lachzalei. Then, although we said that you're forbidden to go back to the husband in certain situations, let's say Al Pi Echad, you're allowed to go back to him. And even if the later one gives her a get, which we said that in certain situations she has to give her a get, Loi Pasam Lekuna, here he does not invalidate it from Kuhuna. It's not even considered a reich a get. There's no element here at all of requirement of a get, even rabbinically, to say that it invalidates her a get from Kuhuna on some level. And as Zud Darsh Rabbi Lazar ben Masi, this Rabbi Lazar ben Darsha expounded from a pasuk Miyikra. It says, "Ve'isha grusha meisha," a woman who's divorced from her husband, lo yikachu, that the Kam should not take. Now, b'loi me'ish she'ein isha, not from a man who's not her man, where here there was no marriage here whatsoever, and therefore there's no get here to make her in any element of a divorcee to be forbidden to a kohen. So the Gemara asks on the terminology. We said that if Yevama goes l'shuk by mistake, thinking that she was not obligated, she thought that her husband died first, then her son, which really turns out the opposite. So he said that the first and last son are going to be mamzer. Says what are you saying first and last? What does that mean? So Elam, if you think to say rishon means to say lifnei shmua, the first one means before she heard the report, that she didn't know yet that it was the other way around. The later ones after she heard the report. But either way, it doesn't make a difference. According as we explained, it's like Rabbi Kiva, that the Isi Yavam Lashuk is there either way, whether she knew or not, and they were the children of Mamzerim. So listening, just to have Lan Mam, the child is Mam. What's the difference? To tell us that historical tidbit, there's before she knew or she did, after she doesn't make a difference. Why would you say Rishon Achron? So you're right. There's really no necessity of saying Rishon Achron over here. Because we wanted to say in the last case of Amal Mes Balach, and this is if they told you that your husband died and she got remarried, and then they tell her, you look, he is dead right now, but Kaim ha Yevamos. Actually was alive when you got married, and only now later on, let's a year or two later, did he die? Oh, then Harisha, now it's important. The first one meaning before the husband had really died. Then those children are mamzer. That's a mamzer because she was still married at the time. The Achron, the ones that were born after the husband had died, and she's still married with the second husband, ain't a mamzer, not a mamzer. So therefore, turning the marisha, therefore also in the opening case, which really is no necessity, we said the same words, Rishon Achron mamzer, the first ones and the later ones. But either way, Kiva, it's Yivam Lashuk, it would be mamzer, but we just kept the terminology because of the safe. Now, relating to this halacha, the Reisha, that we said that the children of Mamzerim, so Talmud learn the Brisa elaborates and says Zudav Rabbi Kiva. This halacha that the children of Mamzerim is only going from Rabbi Kiva. Because he said, in Kedushin Tevis Mechiva Laban, marriage cannot take effect in someone that's negatively prohibited. We hear this woman is Yevama, forbidden Lashuk, a negative prohibition. And therefore, since there's no marriage, it's an illegitimate relationship. There's no marriage that's taking effect, and therefore the children are going to be mamzerim. The sages say, "Ein mamzer yevama." No, there's no mamzer from a yevama who gets married to someone else without chalitza, because there's only negative prohibition that would not create a mamzer. But the Gemara wonders in the words of the Brisa, V'lema, why doesn't the Brisa say in the Chacham's opinion that ein mamzer mechiv alam? There's no mamzer from negative prohibition, which is more global. Why say there's no mamzer from a yevama l'shuk? So the Gemara actually explains, because Haitana, this Chacham Oim that they say there's no mamzer from Yivam Lashuk, obviously you're right, that they obviously hold that there would be Chib Alavin, that the child would be mamzer. It's only from this Chib Alavin of Yivam Lashuk that there isn't. Because it's Hach Tan Rabbi Kiva, it's actually one version of Tanoim according to Rabbi Kiva. Because the Amar, that this they say in Perkach Chutz and Daf Mem Tes Alpha, according to Rabbi Kiva, that Mechiv Alavin de She'er. When there's negative prohibition because of a relationship, for example, the woman that his father raped, which according to Yehuda, there's negative prohibition, as the Gemara says later on, Tzat Zayin and Aleph. Or for example, let's say if someone marries his chalutza, which is a negative prohibition of lo yibana, as the pasuk says the Barim Chafei, it's a negative prohibition of a relationship, it's a certain relationship, it's his sister-in-law. That's where, if you do that marriage, have a mamzer, the child's going to be a mamzer. But Mechiv Alav and Grady, but from a generic negative prohibition, like for example, Yivam Lashuk, or anything like that, where that man, she's not related to it, but it's just negative prohibition for her to marry him, loy have a mamzer. That version, that was Tanam according to Rabbi Kiva, it's not going to be a mamzer, and that's what they're disagreeing with the other Tanam Rabbi Kiva, who holds that no, any Chiv Alav is going to be a mamzer. They say no, Yivam Lashuk, which is the generic Chiv Alav, not that of a sheir, would not create a mamzer, and that's why it says specifically a mamzer be Yivam, but the actual word holds certain Chiv Alav actually would be a mamzer. Now, relating to this halacha of Yivam Lashuk, so Amar Yehuda is Getim to Medbeiz Amar Rav says Minayim. From where do we know this idea? She'in kedushin tevis Yivam. Like Tess explains, meaning even according to Rabbanan, not just like Rabbi Kiva, who holds any Chiv Alavin, but even according to Rabbanan, the kedushin does not take effect by Yivam, which all it is negative prohibition, which generally Chiv Alavin kedushin takes effect. How do we know by Yivam Lashuk kedushin does not take effect? Krishna says the pasuk in the Devarim. It says Loisiya Eishes Hamesa Chutz Le'Ijar. The wife of the one who died should not be onto the outside to a foreign man. What does Loisiya mean? Siya always connotes the word of kedushin. Loisiba Havai Lazar. There's not going to be kedushin for her to a foreign person. The Torah is telling you kedushin does not take effect. That's what Rav says. Shmuel, he says, Be'anu Yusenu, because of our paucity of intelligence, which we don't know how to translate the pasuk, tzricha get, she would need a get from that man that she got married to. Because as the Gemara explained, Shmuel was in doubt Hi, this possibly see Eishas Hameis. Ila lavhu da'asa? Is it coming to tell us a negative prohibition like all of the chiv lavin and therefore kedusha would be taifis? It's just saying, lo yisiyah, don't do kedushin to the wife of the man. It's saying what you shouldn't do. Or e delay tasba kedushin da'asa. Or it's saying, no, kedushin will not be. And he wasn't trying to interpret it. So he said because of doubt, will require a get from that zar that she marries l'shuk. Amalei Rav Mori Baruch Rav Ashi. He says, this is what Mima says. That yes, we require a get. We don't say, like Rav, the Kedushin not Taifas. We would require a get from that Zar that the Yevama went and got married to Lashuk. So, Amar Rav Ashi says, now that Mima said, that you require a get. So, if that's the case, then, however, if let's say her Yavam was a Kain. Now, so this woman, she married some other person, what's called Lashuk, either because one witness or two witnesses who said that, first your husband died, and then your son died, which she thought, okay, I'm not chayiv in yibum, and she goes and married someone else, and then she finds out it was actually the opposite. So Shmuel had said, when a Yevama gets married l'shuk, she requires a get. Problem is, once she's going to get a get from that person that she married, she's anyways going to be puzzled to the Yavam, who's a Kayin, who's going to be invalid from the Grusha. So based on this halacha of Shmuel, it requires a get from that Zar. The halacha is going to be, in this case, if the Yavam is a Kain, chaylitzla, let her Yavam just do chalitzata, v'sharile, and permit her to stay with her husband. Because anyway, she's going to be forbidden to the Yavam. Says the Gemara, is Guri Iska what she's going to gain now? It became a tzin chayt iska. It comes out that a sinner is going to gain because she sinned and she went and did the Isra Yavam l'shuk, which generally we require him to divorce her. So then she can go to the Yavam, but now you're going to tell me that she's going to gain because she went and sinned, that now we're going to force the Yavam to do chalitza and let her stay with the second husband? Taylor rather says the Gemara, no, the teaching was, Imhaya Yavama Yisrael. No, a different case. If her Yavam is not a Kohen, a Yisrael, the Chiddush was the other way around. Nois Nosheini get, like Shmuel had said, so we'll have that second husband give her a get, and v'hutralai, and then she'll be permitted to the Yom. So the Chiddush is in the Yibam, actually, as we'll see, according to the way Rashi at least explains it, it's not that everyone agrees to this halacha of Rav Ashi, and that's what we're saying that no, that Zar, that person who married this Yavama Lashuk, will give her a get, and then she'll be permitted to the Yavam. Now, so related to this teaching, Omer Rav Gidl Rav Chia bar Yosef Omer Rav. He says in the name of Rav as follows: Yevama, kedushin name, but like we said before on the top of the Amid, kedushin is not type. There's no kedushin in the Yevama, but nesuin yashba, but there is marriage. Now, the assumption of the Gemara is regarding a get, that although Rav said that you don't require a get from that second husband, but if she got married to the Zar, because they told her your husband died and then your son, she would require a get, even though kedushin she doesn't require. So the Gemara says, kedushin imba, if there's no kedushin, so nesuin namayamba, so if there's no kedushin, which is first, then she also doesn't have nesuin. Which Teisus Shem actually asks, he says, what's the Gemara's question? If there's no kedushin to require a get, that you're saying that nesuin also wouldn't be, what do you mean? I could disprove that question from the halachas of Eishes Ish. When she gets engaged to another man, she does not require a get, as we learned in the beginning of the parak. But if she gets married, she requires a get. Says Teisus Shem that the Gemara's question is regarding that you're telling me that only if she gets married, that then she would be forbidden on the Yavam. Sounds like, but in a different situation, she would not be forbidden on the Yavam. So therefore, if she's Mizana, it sounds like she would not be forbidden. So that's the Gemara's question. If there's no Kedushin to make her forbidden unto the Yavam, if she was Mekadosh, let's say, to a Zar, and therefore you're saying there's also no problem, but it's no only marriage. So if that's the case, then marriage also should not make her forbidden on the Yavam, because although by Eishes Ish she becomes forbidden with Nisun, but Eishes Ish is different because Nus also makes her forbidden. But here's Nus does not. So then why are you saying that Nisun would make it a problem? That's how Teisus Shem explains the Gemara's question. Either way, Amos says the Gemara, you're right. It would make it wouldn't make sense to make such a differentiation. Rather, say Kedushin v'Nisunim, but you're right. That not only does Rav hold that there's no Kedushin for the Yavama, there's no Nisuin either, and therefore you're right, we don't require a get from that second husband. We're not making her forbidden on the Yavam. Nothing takes effect over here. Over here, if you want, you could say that my Nisuin yesh, but no, it is, there's no Kedushin, but there is Nisuin. What do you mean that there is Nisuin? And the Gemara says Kiznus, meaning it's like Znus, and actually that's why she's forbidden to the Yavam. Because Rav Amnuna, What's Rabbi Nuna's teaching? Rabbi Nuna says, Shemeras Yom Shezinsa, that if a woman waiting for Yevamot was mezana in that interim, asura livama, like a Eishes Ish, which you have the Zika bond, just like a married woman, if she's mezana with someone else, she becomes forbidden to her husband. Here also she becomes forbidden to her Yavam, which, as Rashi points out, Rav Ashi, who quoted previously, that said that the second one gives her a get, and then she goes to be admitted to the Yavam, is obviously not like this teaching of Rav Nuna, who holds that no, that you were mezana, you had a relationship, that's how Rashi is learning it, and therefore you would be forbidden, according to Rav Nun, that you're forbidden, according to Rav Ashi, obviously that you're not, and that was he who was saying the Chiddush is that you can go and be permitted to the Yavam. Or another approach you could say is, no, the truth is like we had originally interpreted, that when we say Kedushin, but there's no Kedushin, and Nesuin Yeshba, that there is Nesuin, it was regarding the halacha of requiring a get. Now, not because it's a Kedushin, like which didn't make sense. If there's no Kedushin, how are you saying that there's a Nesuin to require a get? No, it really shouldn't require, because not really married, you didn't even have a Kedushin, how are you saying that it's a Nesuin? Rather, because if you're going to let her go out without a get, it can be confused with the case of a woman that her husband went overseas, where we're going to come to say also by a woman that her husband went overseas, and then she gets married based on the testimony of one witness, that we're going to say that she could go out without a get, because they're very similar regarding the mistake of the death regarding the Yavam. So because of that, when there's marriage, so then we require, say, okay, look, we're going to require a get from this second husband, where in regards to the Yavam is very similar in regards to the husband, which in regard to the husband that we said in the opening Mishnah of our parak, that, she got married to the second man, yes, she's going to require a get from him, which is like this rabbinic requirement. In contrast, if there was only Kedushin, that's the opening halacha of Rav on this Amid that says, no, you don't require a get, because even a married woman that gets Kedushin through the court's ruling with 1/8, we learned in the opening Mishnah that she could go out without a get from her second husband. So even if in the Mishnah taught that even if the second husband gives her a get from Kedushin, our Mishnah said, does not invalidate it from Kuna. So therefore, it's only applicable this Gezer Rabbanan by Nesuin and not by Kedushin, because it could get confused with the case of Eishes Ish, not regarding this Shemeres Yavam, but even Eishes Ish, and therefore we say, yes, if the Nesuin is a rabbinical concern that we require her to get a get from that Zar, that the Yevama went married Lashuk. Now, Amr B'Yana, he concludes, is B'chabura Nimnu V'Gomer, in the group, they counted and they concluded, in Kedushin Tevsim Yevama, Kedushin does not take effect by the Yevama. In other words, they expound like Rav, that when it says, Loisiya, Eishes HaMesachus Le'zar, it means that there will not be Havaya Kedushin, there is no Kedushin. So Amr B'Yana said to Rabbi Rabbi, my teacher, Le Mishnah Seini Hizu, isn't it a Mishnah? Why do you need the Chabura for? Which Mishnah? It's not like Le Mishnah besides Kedushin. Mishnah says, if someone says to a woman, I want you to be engaged to me, so although right now you can't, but la'achar shes gair. After that, I'm going to become a ger. I know I'm not Jewish now, so I can't make a kedushin. But after I become a ger, I want you to be engaged to me. Or la'achar shes gairi, after you convert. Or la'achar shes shachar, after I become freed from being a slave. Or la'achar shes shachar, after you become freed from being a slave. Or la'achar shemes balach, even though you're married right now, that it should be for after you and your husband dies. Or la'achar shtamasach lesecha, or my wife, that's your sister, after she dies. Or, and this is the most important case for us, la'achar sheyachas lech yevamech, or after that your yavam does chalitza for you. In any one of these cases, if he gives it to her now to take effect after that, says the Mishnah Kedushin, ein mukadeshes. She's not engaged. Why? Because since right now the Kedushin cannot take effect, so it cannot take effect for a later point in time either, because a person cannot make makna double shalom. You cannot make an acquisition on something that's not able to, it's not really extant, it's not available right now. But what do you see? One of the cases is, what is a case of that cannot take effect right now? Is a shemeres yavam. Because it's only but right now, when there was no chalitza yet, you see that it cannot be kedushin. So what do you need the chabur to be nimnu v'gamru? It's a Mishnah kedushin that tells us that kedushin is not taifis and yavam. So Malay, so that Rabbi Yanai said to Rabbi Yechanan, ilav de deloy lach chaspa. If I had not picked up the shard, mi mashkachas maganisa to say, you think you would have found the pearl beneath it? In other words, had I not told you, then you wouldn't have entertained the thing to say that the reason is because the kedusha is not tavis right now. Rather, you would have said that a person cannot makna davar shabla even if you could do it right now. But since you're not doing it right now, you're doing it only post. Even though maybe kedusha would be tavis right now, you would have thought, because it's not for now; it's for a later point in time. now that I explained to you, now you understand it because of the principle of, because Kedusha cannot be Tevis right now, because there's no Kedusha Tevis by Yevamos Daf. Now, however, only Rish Lakish, that's what Rabbi Yanni responds to Rabbi Yochanan. Rish Lakish said to Rabbi Yochanan, Ilav the Kasach Gavir Ab, if not for a great person like Rabbi Yanni praising you for what you said, and he's saying you're right, but you wouldn't have known it without me telling you, no, I actually would have told you that actually Masni, you know who that mission is? It's Rabbi Kiva. He's going like Rabbi Kiva. That he says in Kedushin Teisim B'chiv he says Kedushin doesn't take effect by negative prohibitions, and therefore you're trying to say that you don't even need the teaching of Rav because it's explicit Mishnah Kedushin. He says to the contrary. I would have told you actually no, actually it's not necessarily. You could even say that the Rabban hold that Kedushin is Tevis B'Yevama. That mission is going like Rabbi Kiva holds Kedushin's not Tevis and Chiv Alavin, and the Yevama Shok is a Chiv Alav. Now says the Gemara, wait a second. How could Rish Lakish say that? If it's going like Rabbi Kiva, then when he tells her, last case, that he tells her, okay, I want you to be engaged to me, I'm giving it to you right now, the ring, so that after your Yavam gives Chalitza to you, we should be engaged. And that, the Mishnah says, why? If it's like Rabbi Kiva, Litvis ba Kedusha, the Kedusha actually should take effect. Why? Because the Shemina Rabbi Kiva, we heard from Rabbi Kiva himself that he says, the person could acquire something that didn't happen yet. So even though Kedushin cannot be Taifas, he holds you can make a kinyan something that's not around yet. So why isn't that a valid Kedushin? So it's not like learning Mishnah Masechtas in Dar. Mishnah tells us, the Ketin Tab of Tzadi Gimel Med Aleph, that if a woman tells her husband, Kainim a vow shani Isa, meaning whatever I will do, my handiwork, whatever I'm going to produce, should be forbidden laficha to your mouth based on a vow. So we have a machlekes. Tanakama says, Ein tzarich lahafra. The husband does not have to nullify her vow because since she's meshubetim, she's indebted to him, there's a lien on her handiwork to him, she cannot make a vow forbidding him from those things. So you don't even have to nullify it. Kiva says Yafir. Kiva says yes, you should nullify the vow. Why? Maybe she can do more than what's coming to him. Because the Mishnah Ksubas base tells us that what does she owe him for her handiwork, her maisi daim? So it's 5 slum worth of shesi, which is the warp thread, etc. goes through, and weft thread and other things. But more than that, she's actually not meshubetim, not indebted to him. So it's on the excess that her vow forbidding him would take effect. So therefore, he should nullify it in case she's going to produce more than what she owes him. Now, although the work wasn't even done yet, and therefore you see what? That a kinyan could take effect, a neder could take effect on somebody who's not bola ilm yet. So if that's the case, so if Rish Lakish is saying that Mishnah is like Rabbi Kiva, and if it's not a right to Rabbi Yochanan and Rav, to the contrary, then actually the Kedushin should be Taifas, even though it's Shalei B'La'il. So the Gemara, that's not true. We learned regarding to this teaching of Rabbi Kiva that we just quoted, that it says, by merit, it's only talking where the woman said, Yikachu Yodai Lo Isayim. My hands should be sanctified for the ones who made them, meaning for Hashem, because the Yadayim Isnu Ba'alma. The hands are already Ba'la Olam. And that the neder could take effect on, the kinyan could take effect on. There is typhus because that thing is extant. And therefore, Rish Lakish says that it could be like Rabbi Kiva, because Rabbi Kiva holds Davar Shlebelim cannot take a kinyan, therefore it's going to be Ein Mukadeshes, and therefore it could be like Rabbi Kiva, and therefore you don't have a right to Rabbi Yochanan and to Rav to say that you see that Kedushin is not typhus by Yevamos Daf. It's not true. It could be like Rabbi Kiva specifically who holds Kedushin not typhus by Chiv Alav.